And we're live. Yo, what's up, everyone? And welcome to episode 4 of Coffee and Perspective with Jace. Today, I am going to be chatting to he's one of the most interesting people I've met in my entire life. I've been fortunate enough to work with him on numerous occasions. He is a mentalist, illusionist, magician, and all-round funny guy. He goes by the name of Bryan Miles. So Bryan, so Bryan is he's an entertainer. So we will be covering probably quite a few of the entertainment industry topics. However, he does dabble in a lot of the mentalism, which will lend to more psychology sides of things. And because he is a showman, we're going to probably cover quite a few things that relate to his shows and the business. So before we get going, tell the people who you are, where you come from, and in a nutshell, what you do.
Okay, well, first of all, as you said, my name's Bryan Miles, and first of all, thanks for having me on your little podcast here. I am
Welcome.
All the way in South Africa, in Cape Town at the moment, and yeah, far, far away, right to the bottom of planet Earth. And yeah, I'm a mentalist, magician, illusionist, showman, whatever you want to call it. Just somebody who's kind of obsessed with why things work and how they work at the same time. So from a very young age, obviously, I realized that pretty much everything we do in life takes place in here. And in many ways, we are trapped in our own heads in a kind of way, in a good way though, in a good way. And all we have are the sensory organs to make sense of this world. And then from sort of a youngish age, I began to realize how easy we can be deceived, whether that's consciously or unconsciously. Our brain can be fooled. And as soon as I realized that the brain can be fooled, I began to realize that there are certain techniques and skills that are available to everybody. And if you can home in and tap into those, if you can home in and tap into those, then you can achieve some really interesting stuff. And my first goal has always been to try and make that entertaining, to try and take it and not be clinical about it, but just put it into an entertaining format, whether it's using hypnosis, sleight of hand, the skills of the magician, the skills of a public speaker, whatever it is you want to call it, put it all together and just try and get a little bit under people's skin, but also give them something to think about afterwards without being too preachy.
Yeah. What at what age? I know you said that you found interest when you were quite young.
Yeah.
With that you realized you can manipulate the mind or someone's thoughts. Yeah. At what moment, if you can remember, at what moment did you go, okay, this is something I want to do professionally?
Wow.
This is something that I want to take and make, dedicate my life to doing this. Do you remember at any
I do.
point?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'd always been, from a very young age, I was always the kid who was taking things apart, taking the toys apart, and wanting to know why the Hot Wheels worked. How did that car work, or whatever toy it was? I wanted to know how it worked, but not only how it worked, I wanted to know why it worked. And I slowly began to realize that there was more to these toys than just the kind of sort of friction motor that's in it, or mirror that was in it. And I remember getting one of these little boxes, and you can maybe Google this afterwards. And what it was is a small little box, maybe the size of a Rubik's Cube, maybe a little bit bigger. And it was a money bank. It's called a Tenyo money bank. And you would put a coin in it, but it would look like the coin would just disappear. It looked like the box was empty. And you would put this coin in, and you would put the coin in, and it's achieved with a very, very clever sort of mirror that's placed at a 45-degree angle. It looks like the box is empty.
Yeah.
But if you shook the box, you could hear the coins. And this thing was like there was an added mechanism that you couldn't get the coins out if you didn't know the secret move. So it was even more frustrating. You'd be like, oh, look, the coins go in, that
Then
you
you have to
can't
figure
see
out
them,
how.
but now you don't know how to get them out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that I'm not going to tell you how to do, because you can still buy these and they're great. And I recommend them for as a present for, you know, if you've got children or nieces or nephews or whatever. I think they're great. And I had one of those from a very, very young age. I'm talking like maybe 6, 7 years old. I remember having one, not knowing exactly how it worked. And that fascinated me. And that sat on my shelf for a very, very long time. And as I got older, one of my close friends was also interested in these type of things, you know, beginners magic sets and things like that. I never had one of those, but he had one. And he showed me 1 or 2 things, and I wasn't happy with him just saying, "Oh, well, you see, it's a trap door or whatever." Like, that still wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with that answer. I was like, "But why did it fool me? I don't understand. How did I not know about that? Like, how is it possible that you knew and I didn't know?" And then I guess just I went to the library. My brother reads a lot, and books were always freely available at home.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I ended up reading everything I could about sleight of hand.
The illusion or the magic, or
no, about sleight of hand. What it is that, like, how you know, the saying is that the hand is quicker than the eye, but that's not really true. It's just the hand is more intelligent than the eye. And I needed to understand how it could be that there were skills and techniques that I didn't know existed, and I didn't even know other people who were able to teach it to me. I'll give you an example. Like, if you play sports, you know, like if you play tennis, right, which I love, you know that there's going to be another human being somewhere that's willing to teach you the right grip for your backhand. Like, you know, that person exists. But when it comes to sleight of hand and even hypnosis, which started to intrigue me also from a young age, all I had was books. There was no person I could go to and say, "Hey, this is Johnny. Yeah, he'll teach you how to hypnotize people, and he'll teach you how to use sleight of hand." And that those people just didn't exist. So I had to read books, and reading books sometimes is a little bit better because your brain then interprets it in its own, through its own filter. And so every library book I used to take out when I was like maybe 10 or 11, and like permanent, you know, you could renew your library book, right?
Pre Google
I
era.
was like, just permanently renew the book, you know, just go back in, renew.
Just that you could keep reading that book.
Just over and over. But also at the same time, and this is where it takes a little bit of a weird turn. I found that, like, beginners, like, I want to call them sort of magic tricks, it wasn't enough for me. Like, I was like, this is cool and stuff, you know, you got a matchbox and there's some matches in it and it disappears because it's got a trapdoor, whatever. Those are great. But I took a weird detour, largely because of my older brother as well. And I started to read books on the unexplained. Okay. So books on things like psychics and, you know, astral projection and aliens and metal bending. And I started to think, well, hold on a second. Do these stem from the same tree, or are these two completely different things?
Parts.
And also not happy with the answers of, like, you know, does the Loch Ness monster exist? You know, does Yeti really exist? Has this person had a near-death experience? Has this person been abducted by aliens? And that really intrigued me as well. And along with that kind of unexplained realm comes Rasputin. You know, the guy that could influence the Russian Tsar. I can never say that word. And he was basically a hypnotist, a showman, a charlatan, and so forth. And so I became very interested in these type of stories. And that led me on to things, for example, like the CIA and Area 51, and the whole idea of remote viewing. Is it possible for people to be able to pick up imagery that's, you know, and this type of thing. And that kind of led me more towards the kind of mentalism side. Yeah. And that intrigued me more than just kind of like, here's the coin, it's gone. I still love that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I love that stuff and have huge respect for it. But I kind of veered off this way. Rasputin was very interesting for me as well as Anton Mesmer and all these people that were coming up with animal magnets. Has been reading up about this because I grew up with the internet, but the internet really only came into its sort of functioning in high school, I would say, so this stuff was all from books that I still have and love and have, the dog-eared. And I was just very lucky as I continued this journey to come across interesting people, kind of like what you're doing now. And I stumbled across many interesting performers, and I remember seeing hypnotists on television and being very intrigued with that. But there was no one in South Africa other than Max Colley and Andre the hypnotist, or who's actually still currently going, that were doing hypnosis, but they were doing it in a sort of comedic way, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
But I knew there was something more to it because doctors have been hypnotizing people and stuff. And so I also knew that there was something behind that door as well that was interesting. And I happened to, come across interesting people. I spent a lot of time so I got through high school performing sleight of hand magic and doing mentalism with it.
Yeah.
All through high school.
Yeah. Just as a hobby then at that stage. But actually for money. So I used to, this is an interesting story. I haven't told anybody this, but what was really interesting was I used to perform in the restaurant every week. And I performed in all the restaurants I could name, all of them, Spur, St. Elmo's, Panarotti's, you name it. I've done all of them. You've been there.
And I used to perform once a week, every week for 5 years. Throughout my entire high school career. I used to have to come back from school because I used to catch the bus to school. And I would come back and I would literally come back, shower, change, put on my suit and go work the restaurant and come back and then, decide if I was going to do my homework or whatever and so forth. And so that's how I made my money all through high school. And when I graduated or matriculated, as we would say here, I was encouraged to take a year off, as many people do, and find oneself.
Figure out what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to find yourself.
And is that where you decided to find yourself in?
Yeah. So arts? I thought, okay, let's take a gamble. But I knew that South Africa, as much as I love it, there was no one. There was nobody here that had
the blueprint for you.
Yeah, that could push this forward.
Yeah.
So I to cut a very, very long story short, I basically went to one of these camp fairs in Cape Town where these summer camps come. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but for anyone listening, basically these American people come to Africa and they're put on a camp fair convention, and they love to hire South Africans to go and work in summer camp. Obviously, the summer in America is when our winter is.
Yeah.
And you go and work on a summer camp and they'll pay you and you have to kind of give one of your skills. And so I was at this convention hall and all of these camps were around the hall. And they all have these big posters that look very attractive, and everyone is sitting at the at the tables, and all you hear is American accents and a lot of sort of frivolous young girls who have just matriculated are like, this is a big moment. And I felt very out of place, to be honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I just looked to the right and I saw this big banner and it said the name of the summer camp, and then it had all the things they list: horse riding,
all the cliches.
Yeah, waterfront, skiing, acting, singing, music, tap dancing. I mean, it got quite specific, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Even like rock climbing, and there was some random things. Right at the bottom was like magic. And I was like, what? Like as in magic?
Yeah.
So I went to the table, and there were two people sitting there, and I sat down and I introduced myself.
Yeah.
And said, I see magic. Like, is that as in sleight of hand, you know? And the guy was like, yeah, it is. Why? I'm like, well, I'm a magician. I can do magic. And he was like, you're hired. Literally like that. He's like, you're hired. I was like,
because it was the more rare, probably the more rare.
Yeah. It's like, so yeah, exactly, right? Like,
that was selected.
No one sits down and says that, right? Like,
yeah.
So he's like, you're hired. So I was like, oh, what, like, how does it work? How's this going to work? And he was like, no, and he gave me the forms and we went through everything. But I promise you, it was like that. And that changed my life, because when I actually went over and taught on summer camp, I ended up meeting a lot of really interesting American people. I also met a Canadian hypnotist in person who was able to give me some better direction physically. And I feel like that was quite a moment in my career, although at that particular point I wasn't able to use it as much as I could, because I was still teaching at the summer camp, which was fantastic. So I was able to meet a lot of interesting people, spending time in America, and I ended up going back for several years to the same summer camp, working my way up the hierarchy and so forth, just teaching magic to young kids. And the kids were great. The American kids were fantastic. They learned so fast. Things that took me years to learn, they would learn, in a couple of months and stuff. And so it was very, very rewarding. But at some point I realized I had to come back to South Africa. And I kind of felt like at that time, after 3 years, hopping back and forth, and I even hopped between England as well. I stayed there for 9 months, back in the good old days when us South Africans could go there. That was really tough. And I came back here and I was like, okay, I feel like I've got the skill set now, and I feel like I can start this.
Build a career.
Yeah, and I started really pushing the kind of Bryan Miles persona and so forth. And started performing. I was still performing in the restaurants, and started performing a lot of corporate shows. And as you go along the way, started picking up all sorts of building up your.
And then that was the moment that you realized, okay, I can get some jobs, even if they're still paying. I can kind of like make a living out of this, and eventually just build your brand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think for me, it was kind of like a slow momentum. But the one thing that I am sort of grateful for is that I feel like I was at least conscious to know that I didn't have the skill set. I feel like if I'd started on my own, I might have fizzled out or burnt out or felt like it wouldn't work.
So you needed that time.
Going over to America, going over to the States, just it was like the best thing. Just opened my eyes, and just realized, what was out there and stuff. And so I came back, started performing.
For those that are watching, there's from what I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, you did probably, it was I can imagine it was a big step in your branding and your career, where you got your own TV show on SABC 3. It's for those who are not familiar, it's a South African TV network. And Bryan had his own show, and it was called One Day with Bryan Miles.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I had my own TV show in 2016. It came out in 2016, and it's a 13-part episode. I mean, I'm sure after this, if people want to find it, it's all on YouTube.
I'll try to throw a link in afterwards. So
and you can put a link, and people can watch all of the episodes in glorious HD. On the internet for free. And so having my own TV show is quite a momentous thing to do. It is a lot of work. If anyone listening is interested, I will point out a few interesting points that I think might be of benefit to certain people, even if you don't live in South Africa. If you ever see anybody doing a television show where they are the host as well as the star of the show, you are going to have to put in a lot of work, because if you're an actor, you are given your script. Even if you're the lead, you're not in every scene. You're just not in every scene. You're going to be in the majority of scenes, but you're not in every scene. If you are the only star in the show, you're in every scene.
The show is revolving around you.
Every single scene is you. And it is very tiring. It is a lot of work. and also writing for the show.
That was about to say, did you produce as well? Because it was your own show. So
So the show was produced by a production company that's based in Cape Town, but the show was written and created by myself and my Canadian hypnotist friend.
All right.
So we did it together, and he flew out here for a few weeks to help set up the show and help get the production running.
Yeah.
And it is something I'm very proud of, because there are a lot of demonstrations and stunts that we did in that show that have never been done in South Africa ever. And we tried to be as creative as we could with that show. And obviously people can watch it and they can check it out for themselves, and they get to see Cape Town as well and so forth. So that was very, very cool. I was also very fortunate enough, now that you're mentioning sort of milestones as you go up. That I was approached by an American publisher as well to also write a book to help people get interested in magic, because a lot of people have a misconception about magic. There's kind of stigma towards it, stereotypes as well, where magic is just done at a children's birthday party. But in the truth, there are various forms of magic, and children's magic is just one genre of magic. And I always thought that if someone wanted to learn the skills, because it's the ultimate paradox, right? I mean, how does the magician carry on the art if he's not supposed to tell the secret? It doesn't make sense. And I respect the secrecy of magic, but I've always been one to pass the art on, and if people come to me and really ask, especially students, I'm always willing to help. I don't
reveal the secrets or how you do it.
I don't think magic is this big closed box. And if it is a closed box and you open it, it's just empty. So I was able to put together a book for people who are willing to start out in magic. And I tried to write the book in a way that if I was young or an adult, what would be the best way to learn it? And so my book was also published in 2016, and it's available at all fine bookstores. It's available on Amazon. And it's something I'm very proud of, because that also took a lot of work. That was well over a year of my life, writing every day.
Writing takes time.
And photograph and doing the concept, and that just took a long time. But it's something I'm very, very proud of, and it's consistently stayed in the top sort of 100 on Amazon in the magic or magic and illusion or games or whatever categories they throw them out in. So I've been very proud of that. And people still message me, and I've even had people send me videos of them performing effects from the book, which is really, really cool. Yeah, so it's really
when we put down from here, I'll just get you to send me those links as well. So whoever's watching, maybe there is someone that wants to check out the book and get it on Amazon. It's available in digital format as well, I'm guessing.
You can get it on Kindle or whatever.
So they can get there. Then from moving from your TV, which I love, by the way, I've seen your episodes on YouTube. So moving through the One Day with Bryan Miles, growing up, this is where I met you, was doing the actual live theater performances. So for those who have been lucky enough to watch Bryan perform a show live, you will understand what I mean when it's one of those shows where personally, I've watched you, a ton of times.
Dozens.
I've watched the show dozens of times, where even if I was watching the same show of yours for the 10th time, I still walked out of that theater going, how did you do that? How did you, because that's the thing. Even if you had to have told me how you did it, it was, you performed it in such a way that it just blew my mind. And that's why I came for the 10th performance. I wasn't just there for the one, because you kept entertaining me, even though I knew what you were doing in your show. From a structure point of view, it was still super, super entertaining. So you've done the theaters, you've done some corporate events. We met on the cruise ship where you were doing your show. I saw the last one that you were doing now with MSC was called Mind Waves. So nice play on words.
Yeah, isn't that great, right? And that's all me. I came up with that name. No, yeah,
very creative.
yeah,
So from
yeah.
what I want to get in with the live aspect of things, and let's keep it to, it can be anything from the up close type of magic to the theaters, like you perform for thousands
Mm-hmm.
on the stage. What is your process when you, first of all, creating a show um, for an audience, first of all? So not the small thing,
Mm-hmm.
but for an audience, when you're creating a 35, 40-minute show, what is
Yeah.
your, in brief, like, of course, you know, you don't need to give
Yeah,
away
yeah,
or your side tricks, but
yeah.
what is your thought process when putting a show together like this?
Yeah, I think a lot of my work, especially for corporates, and it's just on a slight side note, which is really interesting, is like uh, performing in the corporate world, as you know, but for people who don't, is, I mean, I've done dozens and dozens, hundreds of corporate shows, but the audience is very specific. It's all work colleagues. A lot of them are there and they don't actually want to be there. These events are very closed off. I call them private events.
Yeah.
And that's a very different audience. And often I work with the client to bespoke, do something nice and tailored for them, like really, they obviously have a message and I'm able to adapt and be creative and do that. If I'm performing a public show where people can like buy a ticket
Tickets and
come
come
and see
to
me,
watch. Yeah.
let's call that a theater show. It's a very different audience. People already know me. I don't have to tell them who I am and what I do. Excuse me. So the processes differ a little bit, but I would talk about the theater show because you asked, about the theater. If I'm going to do a theater show, the first question I ask myself is, who am I going to be performing for? Are these teenagers? Are they adults? Are they families? What is the demographic, more or less, that I'm going to be?
I'm going to jump in. Let's say
Yeah.
it is like we've experienced with the cruise ship, where it could be a
Okay.
mix. It could be a mixed
Okay. Cool.
nationality,
Okay.
mixed
Yeah.
ages, families.
Okay. Yeah. So a good spectrum of audience. I would my first sort of criteria that I put in is that the show has to be interactive. The people that come and see the show have to be part of the show.
Not just watching.
There are a lot of people that are dancers or singers or musicians. Take nothing away from them. I can't compare apples with pears, but many of those art forms, like I love playing guitar, don't get me wrong, but I can practice in my bedroom and just play guitar all day by myself. And I can more or less translate that onto the stage and just play guitar, look at the fretboard, never look up, and be amazing and burn the fretboard up. But with my art involves the human equation. It's people. So it has to be interactive. People have to either come up on stage and be involved in what I'm doing. In other words, they're a necessary part, or they should be able to take part in their seats. Because I know a lot of people, it's petrifying for them to come on stage. Yeah. So I would say my first element would be interactive. The audience have to be a necessary, active, not passive part of the show. And then the second thing would be to do demonstrations that showcase their abilities. And I'm just this kind of facilitator. If we can put it in kind of rough terms, is I like to give the power that I've developed, if we can call it that, to them, or have them experience with me what that feels like.
And that's one of the like I said, when I was in your shows, that normally you put it towards the front of the show at the start of the show, usually. And that's normally like the first trigger, like mind blown. Like, how can he make me think of something?
Yes.
How can he make me picture something, not say it?
Exactly.
And you said, and everyone's going, how did he do that type of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So those are just like two or three things that I think are very important for a show. And also the demonstrations that I do, I try to I try, obviously within every art form there are classics. For example, if you are a musician, there's only a certain amount of scales that you can learn. Now you can go and learn all the obscure ones, but everyone knows those scales exist. They're somewhere in a book, somewhere, and you can go and learn them. And your style is what you pick.
Yeah.
In the magical arts, it's very similar. There are certain skills and there are certain effects that we would call classics. But I always like to kind of just give it a little bit of my own flavor, because I feel that if I'm just verbatim doing something that somebody else created, I'm not really an artist. And this is the constant debate.
You're not making it unique to yourself.
Yeah, the comparison I make always is a cover band versus writing original music. Nothing wrong with either of them, but I think a true artist would say one that can now take the songs and write their own music. I think as a performer, I've always wanted to try and do my own things, and it's tough. It's very tough. And so that would be another element that I would put in. There has to be something of you in there. It doesn't have to be 100% you, but it has to be your take on something or your version of something, or you take just 2 or 3 elements from something and then you build on top of that. So that's very important for me, because I don't want people to say, and it's tough, I don't want people to say, yeah, we miss Bryan Miles, but I'm sure aren't we gonna see like another mentalist?
Yeah, another
tomorrow?
mentalist, exactly.
Yeah, even though the genre is the same, I want them to come and see the show because of me, and I hope that I treat the volunteers, with respect, and that they feel welcome, and that they leave the theater going, wow, I never thought about that this way. Even if 2 minutes after leaving the theater they go, oh, because okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
While you were watching the show, 35 minutes, 38 minutes, you forgot about what you need to iron when you get home. You forgot about, oh, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? You just had an experience.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
That is entertainment for me.
I will say, because, maybe you want to keep humble about it, but every time I've seen you, and I think this is what really also separates the showmanship from the skill, where you take your show, like you say, which involves, or the ones that I've seen at least, which involves the mentalism, the illusion, the sleight of hand, which you don't realize it's sleight of hand, but you do incorporate it into your acts.
Of course, yeah.
As well as the magic, quote unquote magic that you can do. But then on top of that skill set, you have the persona and the showmanship, and I'm going to put it in the sense that it's dry humor, the way you come across for me.
Yeah.
And it just works. It just works. Like, you're not over the top. You're very calm. You're very passive. And like you say, your show is interactive. So, and that's what also I take my hat off to anyone that does this sort of art form, is that I can come up as one of your, what do you call it, subjects, or one of your participants.
Yeah.
I can come up. I might not react the way that you particularly need me to react for this segment of your show. And you can try, and then from that, as I'm aware, you have to have 10 different options to get me to react to this segment. And for that, it's not only, okay, here's my script. It's, you have to think on your feet, because anything can go wrong at any time when you've got the interactive approach.
And it's so interesting what you're saying. I was actually having this conversation with a colleague a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And I've been clocking hours on a particular effect that I've been doing. And after every show, I take notes. I film every show I do for my own. The best advice I can give to anyone who's an entertainer, musician, comedian, singer, whatever, is buy a GoPro, dedicate it to every show you do, film it for yourself.
Watch yourself back, learn from your mistakes.
My girlfriend, she will vouch for you. I watch that footage back. I watch every show back and I cringe at certain things, but I take notes.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that I was talking about to my mate about this was, once you've got your show, in particular with our art, you then need to think, okay, great, what can go wrong with this? And if it goes wrong, what can I do about it? Now, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And also, what keeps me on my toes is the volunteers and the audience members that I use for my show are chosen at random. And sometimes it's hit or miss. You mentioned it now, which I thought was really interesting as well. Like, I can get a person up, and only after I've done a few kind of things to kind of warm them up do I realize that actually this person is not going to be a great subject.
They're not going to be working.
Sometimes it comes from basic errors, basic instructions, especially in South Africa, where we have 12 official languages. In the States, it's so easy. People laugh. Like in the US, when I was performing, I never had to ask someone, can you speak English or read English? I've never had to ask somebody that. And I have to do it here because, we have a lot of
some of your things you got to write on the boards, or
or just basic instructions. Tell someone to close their eyes or whatever. So certain things we take for granted like that. And working with volunteers on stage is also what keeps me excited. Because every show is different, if you know what I mean. Every show is different, and it really is different for me. Because I could get a fantastic volunteer up and have a great time, and the audience love it, or I could get a volunteer up and it's kind of hit or miss and the audience will have a great time and stuff. But because every show is different, it keeps me still excited, because I think I would probably get very bored if every show was verbatim. Like deja vu, a Groundhog Night.
Is there any particular, I mean, obviously our chat isn't prepared, so I haven't prepped you with any questions. It's just whatever comes in my head now. But has there been any one particular or two particular moments in one of these shows that you've done that stand out, that you go, okay, like this is one for the books, like I will never forget moments in one of those? Is there one that you can
I could go on and tell you. I mean, you'd have to pick.
Okay, share one of the more recent ones.
I can think of it. I can think of a really, really funny one that happened maybe 2 months ago, if that.
Okay.
Because I've been home now for a month. Yeah, so 2 months. I got a volunteer up on stage, and it was a lovely lady. And she sat down in the chair, and I was busy talking to her, and someone was making a noise in the audience. Like I could just hear a sound, and I looked down, and it was her infant daughter. When I say infant, probably like reality, probably like 4 or 5 years old. And this little girl comes running down the stairs, up the stairs, onto the stage, because mommy is on stage. Okay. So I'm like, oh, it's very nice to meet you. What's your name? Sarah. Very nice to meet you, Sarah. Sarah, mommy's going to be on stage with the performer, so you can just sit in the front row here and you can watch mom. And obviously it's a kid, so then they don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So as I'm talking to excuse me, the little girl, and I look back, here comes little brother down the aisle.
Running off.
Okay. And he runs up the stairs and he comes onto the stage, and this is the best.
Yeah.
And I had some, it was a really funny moment. And the little boy just runs backstage. He just goes into the wing and he's gone.
Out.
He's gone. And I was like, well, it was really nice knowing your brother. I'm sure he was a nice kid, because he just disappeared into the darkness, like into the wing. Gone.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So I was like, okay. Is dad around? And like dad stands up, I'm like, give the dad of the year a round of applause. He comes down the aisle. He walks up the stairs. Yeah. He goes backstage and he comes back out with a kid. Everyone's like, woo, because it's just me on stage doing the show, and like one stagehand who's like doing the curtains and something. That's it. I don't have a crew with me.
There's no tech crew.
So he takes the the kid and the girl, and he takes them on stage, and the audience give him a big round of applause. And I was like, yeah, maybe you want to increase nap time for them, but it was just a funny moment where I've never ever had, and I've had weird things. I mean, I've had people vomit on stage and slip and fall, and all those things. I've never had somebody just come up and go backstage and like literally dead silence, gone.
Yeah,
and that was really funny. And so that was just something I can think off the top of my head.
That's the joys of the live entertainment, like especially because your show's interactive. I mean, what we kind of do with, if it's production or with the singing or the musicians, like you kind of just go with it, but because you're speaking constantly to the audience, that they feel like, well, your space is their space as well, where it can happen. You have to be on your toes, like you are.
It was funny.
You have to have those quick comments to come back with. And like you say, sometimes our brains can go into like sarcasm mode, and it could come out as maybe a little bit disrespectful to the audience.
Yes. Because
I mean, I know myself like that. I can say something very sarcastic as a joke, but you with a 1,000-seat audience, and not everyone's going to take it the way you meant it.
No, you want to try and be as respectful as you can, and it was a funny moment. And I remember talking to the stagehand afterwards, and he was like, he's never experienced that. Like if someone just went backstage, and the thing is, I was actually more worried that the poor boy would walk into something, because it's pitch dark. There's nothing. I don't know how. It's like waking up with the light. Like you can't see a thing backstage. You're blind.
It's
dangerous. So I was a little bit more worried that he would hurt himself. But luckily, it came at the moment of choosing a volunteer. It wasn't in the middle of. We weren't like
your show
doing something. It was so funny. I was just like this. I thought it'd be really funny if he went off that way and came out the other wing. That would have been great. Yeah, that would have been that would have been the bomb.
Then, when you do your shows, and I mean, each person needs to try, and you touched on this a little bit already, but each person needs to try. You've got your why, you've got the goal that you want to try achieve, whether it be, like you said, people forget about doing their laundry or their ironing, whatever you're related to. What is it, in summary, that when that audience leaves or the audience member leaves, what do you want to achieve by the time they leave watching one of your live performances?
This might sound very cliche, but I want people to leave with more questions than they came in with. People can be. There's a fine line between being critical and cynical, as we know. It's the same between being talented and vain. It's hard to dance between those two. And I think when people come to see the show, they're often quite scared because of the stigmas and the stereotypes of, even if they don't know what a mentalist is, they just know it's, a lot of people associate magic and mysticism and hypnosis with the occult still. It's still a problem. It's a huge problem. And I could talk for hours on that. But I think people come in a little nervous. And I hope that when they leave, that nervous tension or that element of being afraid has left them, and they leave with more questions going, are the decisions I really make my own? Like, did I really want to go and eat pizza tonight? Or am I just settling for second best? Or is it because my family want to eat pizza, I've just given in? Are the decisions I make really my own? And something that's huge, huge, huge for me, which was a large part of the Mindwave show that you mentioned, because it's largely based upon free will. Do we have free will, or does it just feel free? And so for me, this is a huge thing, and this is something I've thought about even when I was younger. Are the choices and decisions that I make in my life really my own? And if they are, how do I know that? There's a lot of, literature been written on, the concept of free will, and some people will say that the only choice we have is to have free will, which is in itself an interesting paradox. So for me, that's huge. So when people leave the theater, I want them to have had a little kick in the head and go, hold on a second. I don't understand how,
Question themselves.
yeah, like how, you know, that person that he clearly doesn't know, because I mean, you know, I'm not, you know, there's no, I've used volunteers that are chosen at
That you've
random
never
in
met.
every show. I've done
Yeah.
hundreds of shows, you know.
Yeah.
They go, you know, I know that lady, Sarah, you know, and then they'll go and talk to her. And she said, I've never met the guy in my life. He said, but, you know, as different as we are, we like to think we're unique, but so is everybody else. And there's certain patterns and traits and what do we call them? Population stereotypes that we all fall into that in many instances we can't really explain. You know, if you, you know, for example, you know, you ask someone to think of a number between 1 and 10. Why do the majority of people say 7 or 3? We don't really know why. We just know that they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's a lot of these things that I don't want to call them unexplained, because I'm sure there's some type of explanation, but they just feel so strange to us, yet we're all doing them. And then you realize that you are just one very, very small fish in a huge
A huge pond.
pond. Yeah, so for me, that's interesting. So I think the biggest takeaway is more questions and to have like a slight kick in the head and just go, oh, okay. I never thought about it that way.
Thought about it that way. Yeah. I'll start wrapping off soon, but
Yeah, sure.
in the concept of the journeys that that I'm I'm going to be speaking with people about, majority of the time there would have been a period through your journey, either in the learning phase or within your actual career that you're already running, where you might have second guessed yourself, or you might have had doubt whether, is this the right career path for me? Is this really what I should be doing? Am I good enough? These sorts of questions. Was there any moment in your career where, or your journey, let's call it, where you had this sort of doubt or speed bumps in the road that might have happened, where maybe you weren't getting work, or you weren't getting jobs, or you were sitting poor, or something like that? And if so, how did you manage to overcome them and still be sitting here as a performing artist?
Sure. Yeah, good question. I think I'll generalize and say I think every performer goes through periods of, you know, just immense joy and satisfaction, as well as huge depressive dongas or valleys, whatever you want to call it. And I always have viewed, and something that's helped me along the way, this is my 2 cents of philosophy here, is I don't view happiness or success or whatever these things are. I don't see them as a linear plane. Like I think, and I could say the same for morality as well. But anyway, I think there's peaks and valleys. I think your life is peaks and valleys all over the place, and it's not the steady progression. You know, people always say things to me like, oh, you know, you wrote a book and everything, like, oh, you know, you've done it. Like, I don't know what that means to
you're successful, you've made it.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. You know, I just have these things that I do, and I'm not quite sure what they mean when they say that. And sometimes I take offense when I ask them that, but I know they mean well, but still, I don't know what that means. And so I think along my journey along the way, I've had like immense failures. I've had many no's. I've had to knock on many doors, and I've had multiple no's. And I've tried to use the philosophy that every no is just closer to a yes. And that is true statistically. I mean, on the probability scale, that's what's going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
But it's the same, I could say, for driving my car. The more I drive my car, the closer I get to having an accident. So that makes no sense. But of course, I've had doubts and things along the way. I've never doubted what I do and why I do it. I've never gone and said, you know, I think my interior motives are wrong. You know, and I mean both, but you know, both
because from the get-go, you always know your intention behind what you've been doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've always this just felt right. You know, it's like a lot of people would say, like I'm sure Roger Federer would say the same. He's just been playing tennis. It it just is.
It wasn't a
He's
force.
never.
It wasn't a forced action.
Yeah, it just that's what came up. Not sure Tiger Woods could say the same, but he still did play golf because he wanted to play golf. But still, so it's just always felt right. And there's been loads of speed bumps along the way. I mean, there's been cancelled shows, things that go wrong, horribly wrong. You're rehearsing for months for like 20 minutes on stage, and it doesn't quite go the way you think, and so forth. And an interesting piece of philosophy that I remembered is your rehearsals can never be like your performance. And it took me a long time to realize that as well. You rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and then you do the show, and the two somehow they don't feel the same. But I had to realize that they can never feel the same. They will never feel the same. Your rehearsal, you're like, oh man, I nailed that.
Different
and then you go out on stage and you do it, and it just feels either better or worse, but it can never be the same. And it took me a long time to realize that. And I think I struggled a little bit with that. But I never doubted like why I was doing it and what I was doing it, or now is the time to kind of end it all and everything. Even through difficult times and things like that, I just see it as peaks and valleys. And
so when you get to those moments, like the 20-minute, you've been rehearsing for months for a 20-minute segment, 20-minute segment completely flops, like who is this guy type of thing. How do you leave that going, okay, let's brush it off and on we go? How do you personally deal with that 20 minutes of slow clap?
I kind of think to myself, like, I always I'll analyze the show, I will take my notes, I'll watch the footage back, I'll get that feedback. I think it's important to have a small group of colleagues that you can trust, that you can listen to, that will be honest with you. A small support group. It could even be 3 people, but 3 people that either know your art or know you, or both, and have some type of valued expertise. And to bounce, like if I felt negative about that, I would bounce it off them, and they can be the soundboard, which will help me feel better.
Feedback.
Or I can do a show and that maybe they witnessed, and I can ask them for critical feedback, with the mindset that every performance I do is in itself a learning experience. So I remind myself, I say, that wasn't it. That is just another stepping stone on
learning. So then you try not to make that same mistake in the next show.
Yeah. So every show is a learning experience for me. And a lot of the times, especially with television work, because TV allows you to do certain things that you couldn't do on stage, like I can have a helicopter or I can do all these things. You've really only got one shot at it. And once you've filmed and it's in the can and you watch it back, there are a myriad of things you can go, oh, if only if we just
that way. Or
and if you have that constant mindset, you will go mad. You will literally go mad.
Because when you were doing it, it felt right in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, right in the moment, that was the best in the moment.
Yeah.
Don't be too hard on watching it back.
And also, as an artist, you will never be happy with anything you do, ever. 5 years from now, we'll be watching this podcast back, and you'll be like, "Oh man, if only it would have been easier if we just, we should have just, there's always things that you can like change."
Sure.
And the best thing I can explain to people is, once you've given all your energy to something and you feel like you've put in the right amount of time, which is only you can answer that question.
Yeah.
And you perform it to the best of your ability, there are always going to be things that go wrong. So don't beat yourself up about those. Try and just use those as not failure, but try and view it as feedback for yourself. So it might just be semantics, but whatever. And then take it, fold the lotus leaf up, put it on the lake, and just watch it go over the waterfall and move on. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to dwell on that thing forever,
Yeah.
it's going to
You'll
eat
never
you
move
up.
forward. Mm-hmm.
You will never move forward. And so
And in
those
the
are my,
in the entertainment arts, there's, because you've got
oh,
thousands of
geez.
people watching you in
And
your shows,
also,
the criticism will come in
oh man,
all
and
all shapes
also,
and forms.
and just one final tip is, if you're going to put yourself out in the public eye, you're going to get shot. It's a matter of time. If you haven't been shot yet, you're going to get shot again. You're going to get shot multiple times.
Yeah.
You need to have thick skin,
Yeah.
and you need to have that support group that you know will look after you and give you critical feedback. They won't just say, "Oh, it was great." No. I
You don't
want
want the
more
yes
than that.
people. No.
Yeah, I want more than that. But know that they have your best interest at heart. And those that criticize you and want to pull you down and stuff, it's really, and especially now in the age of social media, it is so tempting to go online. Like if you have a TV show like I did and you put yourself out, the amount of messages I got on Facebook, on any way these people can get hold of me is like a
You're
plethora
a
of
fake,
stuff.
you're a fraud, you this, you.
Yeah, and how can you do this, and you worship this, and you do this, and da da da.
Yeah.
And I can choose to respond to those or not. And
Mm-hmm.
I choose to not be delusional about it, but I choose to, those people, me responding to them is not going to change their mind. They've made their minds up.
No, if they've
You know
got an
what?
opinion, like it's just going to
They can
drain
do
your
it.
energy by replying.
Yeah, and those that enjoy the show, that's what I'm doing it for. And it's like music, you know, not everybody likes jazz, you know, it's just one of those things.
Great, man. Look, I think we've touched on quite a few, not only entertainment and show wise, but a lot of philosophical points,
life lessons,
and a lot of thinking that you brought to the table. And even as well as I do know you, and I've seen your incredible products numerous times, like I've learned a lot even just by chatting to you now today. So thank you for that.
I'm glad to hear that.
So for those that are, I will link the book, I will link your TV special below after this. Where else can people connect with you, whether it be on social or whichever platform?
Yeah.
Just to either give you feedback about this podcast, they can comment in the thing below
Yeah.
here, or just to connect with you maybe for a future corporate, or they're looking for what you can bring.
I mean, the easiest way is for people to email me, which is info@bryanmiles.com, which I'm sure you can put for people. That's the easiest and quickest way to get hold of me, because I'm very good on the emails. Social media, sure, I'm not myself a huge fan of it, and that's a separate podcast we can talk about. But info@bryanmiles.com is probably the best and quickest way to get hold of me for anything, really.
Cool. What I'll do is I'll pop your website below as well, just because that's
website, that's
the general contact for everyone. And yeah, for those of you who are looking for, and I will endorse this. He is super entertaining, super charismatic, in the live setting for sure.
But not as good looking as you. That's the only thing, you know.
The thing is, I'm starting to age a little bit over here. Get in the gray. So yeah, I can vouch for, he is a incredible person and entertainer. So I thank you. I'm very glad that our paths crossed those years ago when we did.
Yeah, me too.
And thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your journey. It's been very interesting.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. All right, everyone. For those of you who have watched this through, who have liked it, please like it, share it with not only the people in entertainment, but anyone who will find this. Share it with your family, your cousins, your work colleagues. Share it with them. Give some feedback in the comments below on YouTube and on Facebook as to any thoughts or opinions or anything that was running through your mind while watching this. And check all the links below that I will eventually tag, that you can contact Bryan. And yeah, I actually hope that we'll do a follow-up sometime where we've got a lot of things, even from the psychological point of view to the mindset to the philosophy. We've got a ton that you and me can actually talk about. So I can definitely see a follow-up coming on. Definitely. All right, everyone. This is Coffee and Perspective 004 with the incredible Bryan Miles. Thank you for your time.